Oh, do you want me to hit record? Oh,
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Data Ideas podcast. This is your co-host, Dustin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Brandy. I'm glad to actually be back. Brandy has been gracious enough to be hosting the show here these last few episodes while I've been away. But it's exciting to be co-hosting this again. Brandy and I were talking about that beforehand. This is going to be fun.
yeah, we're going to have a good time. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast.
Absolutely. So we are actually joined by someone that Brandy and I wanted to get to know a little bit better today. We're pretty excited about this. So Keshia is actually a data governance expert, works for a company that's actually based in Brandy and I's home base here of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Keshia is actually in Kansas City. My son just wore a Kansas City Chiefs hat to school today, by the way. Had drop off. I'm sure a lot of people by you are excited about that. But we're really excited because data governance is a topic that's super important, growing in importance every day, every minute. I've done a lot more work in around this topic of data and analytics governance over the last year. So we're really looking forward to learning about you, about your career background, and kind of what things look like day to day as a data governance expert, consultant, professional. So welcome, Keshia. And we're going to jump right into kind of the first question, which will allow you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit more. So you've held a variety of positions in your career. Most of them have been within the data industry, but can you give us just a little bit of background about you and your career journey?
Thank you so much for having me to kick it off. Absolutely. So I've got an extensive amount of experience, almost 20 years amongst the legal and financial services industry. And essentially it started with data entry, financial, like finance and accounting. And then it just progressed from there to financial analysis, which then got me into the business intelligence and analytics. And then in those special opportunities with financial analysis, I was exposed to the technology side of the house, which, as many know, getting access to SQL Server is like a game changer, especially when self-service, comes into play. And I still remember creating my first refreshable spreadsheet. So that was a game changer for sure. And then from there, just moving into, the analyst role in the financial services from the legal side of the house, and doing AUM reporting, compliance and audit, SEC, things like that, which then ultimately led me to leading a reporting team and then a data management team, getting more technical on that side, and just gradually and organically into data governance. So that's kind of in a nutshell, my experience and just breadth across the data life cycle as it comes to this industry.
Yeah. And yeah, it sounds like you have experience in really that whole process, that end-to-end process, which makes you like a data superhero pretty much. Like your ability to flex and you have this experience in all of these different spaces, which is really awesome. I think one of the things that came up in our pre-call and just that I saw in your LinkedIn profile is that you're a black belt in Six Sigma. And honestly, I don't really know a lot about that, but I'd love to know maybe a little bit more about it, and particularly how that credential has helped you in the work that you're doing in the data field.
Yeah, so Six Sigma in general is all about continuous process improvement and eliminating waste and error. So I think that the way that relates and has helped me in the data field is just technology is constantly changing. And it gives us opportunity to continuously improve, whether that's metrics and benchmarks and understanding data in that aspect, and then helps you ultimately improve processes, get curious of how data comes in, how it gets affected, how it's manipulated, and then ultimately reported out. So I think that the Six Sigma credential, especially being a black belt, it gives opportunity and perspective to find those Kaizen blitz, or at least those quick wins, and just really understanding how to make processes more efficient and how to affect data quality in a positive way in that instance.
Very cool. Yeah, I think this will be definitely a takeaway for me, just to learn a little bit more about that credential, and thank you for elaborating on that. I appreciate it.
Randy, I'll pause for a second. Do you think you might get the credential yourself? You sounded kind of interested in that.
Well, here's my problem. I love getting credentials. I love the I love learning just generally. I mean, that's evidenced by the fact that I run the data book club, but I love learning, and I think there's something about credentials that it gives you something to work towards. So I really like that. But I'm also a huge fan of process improvement and having processes in place that like really um, help achieve something or add value. So I'm a big fan. And I'm also just a big fan of Keisha. I look up to her quite a bit. We there's actually, sorry if I could go off on a personal tangent for a moment. We actually have a few things in common. We both ride motorcycles, and there's just other things I think, maybe some parallels between the types of things that we enjoy doing. And so when Keisha was talking about this, I was like, ooh, maybe I should, like, I'm fangirling a little bit and just thinking like, oh, if Keisha finds value in this, maybe I'll find value in this. So that's really where that where that's coming from.
And
But
and
I
what, Brandy, you can't now. I can't let you off the hook here. You said you both ride motorcycles. We're in Milwaukee. Obviously, there's a big motorcycle manufacturer here. What kind of? I'll put you on the spot. What kind of motorcycles do you have?
I am, I love my city of Milwaukee. I have a Harley Davidson. Yeah. Sportster Iron 883.
Cool. And Keisha, how about you?
Yeah. So when Brandy talked about what bike she had, like I had actually test driven the 883 and the 48 and 100% 883. Like that's my go-to. Yeah. Love Harley Davidson, love motorcycles and just the freedom that you feel when you're on one. So something we
That's
bond
awesome.
over for sure.
I think
But
you
yes,
probably
Six
just
Sense.
if you're going to earn yourself some more fans and followers on your data governance expertise and Six Sigma expertise, but I think you also gained a new fan base there too. So
Yeah.
very cool.
Thanks for letting me
Awesome.
go off on
Okay,
that one.
okay. We'll get back to the data.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, maybe we should talk a little bit about the intersection of data and riding motorcycles. Maybe there's something more there. But Keisha, you talk about this career journey that you've been on and how, kind of at the end of it, not that we're necessarily at the end of your career, but like right now you're working in data governance. Um, can you maybe speak a little bit more about what drew you to data governance and maybe your favorite thing about it?
Yeah. So I would say just the enablement of supporting the business and in return, having a better client experience. So when there's clean data and data quality and process improvement, that's obviously a passion of mine. When people are using responsibly or are using data responsibly, and there's a lot of collaboration and just the goal of operating as efficiently as possible. I think that that's why I was drawn to governance. And I think also coming from, the data and analytics side to data management, it was just organic just to have those experiences, know how difficult it is to cleanse data, how much time it takes to do that, to normalize it. And just those experiences have given me firsthand views of there's got to be a better way for this. Like, what's the next step? And I think that that's how data governance just came knocking at the door of like, oh, this exists. Like, how can I help better the business, support the clients in a way that people can operate within the organization responsibly when it comes to data?
Yeah, and I think it's just, if I were to, maybe offer my perspective, it's so foundational. A few books ago, the Data Book Club read this book called Upstream, and the idea is that, if there's problems that exist or something, going farther upstream to address them. And I think, that's really where, I think data governance sits, is like so far upstream that it has such a large impact on an organization's use of data. So anyway, I think that's incredible. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and this whole has to be a better way is definitely something that I've thought a lot about. I mean, for probably a 10-year stretch or so, where it's kind of in progressive roles within organizations in our area. So I was doing work within the companies, where I was an analyst or analytics leader. And especially like as like analytics initiatives started to gain traction, that's a good thing. Like with that, there's a lot more eyeballs on there. There's a lot more demand for just a little more questions, like the importance of making sure everything is accurate continues to go up. It doesn't go down as engagement grows, and so but then it's also a big challenge to kind of keep an eye on all these things and to make sure everything is right. And that becomes a growing challenge as engagement grows within your organization, that appetite grows around data and analytics. So that's something I want to talk more about and learn more from you about, like this better way and what that looks like. Because I think a lot of organizations and a lot of analytics leaders in particular are probably thinking the same thing if they don't have good data and analytics governance in place. So I want to table that for just a second. We'll get a little bit deeper into that. But what, there's folks that definitely, like, I see more and more roles around data governance out there, and data quality and things like that. And folks are, asking Brandy and I, like, hey, like, how do we get into this career path? Or like, what advice would we have for someone that wants to kind of go that route rather than like maybe like a front end data analyst or data science position? What kind of advice would you have for folks that might be listening there? Like, yeah, this data governance field seems like it's growing. I get that it's going to be more and more important. Like, what should they be thinking about in terms of like how they could get into it? What advice would you have for them?
So depending on what role maybe they have today, or if they're looking to change careers, I would say just getting into the weeds, getting curious, having a healthy level of skepticism when it comes to data. And honestly, I would even recommend getting in as an analyst. That way you have the exposure to data, or a position at least that gives you the opportunity to pull data and work with data. I think that keeping in mind that processes fail and people don't, I think that's super important and helpful. Also, experiencing bad data makes you appreciate good data, and it enables you to really see the importance of high quality data within an organization. So I think that ultimately promotes like the overall goal of running like a well-oiled machine, which is very effective and efficient. So that's what I would recommend, is starting at the bottom if you have to, getting really curious about the data and just knowing, especially if it's manual input by a human, that there might be errors and there might not be, but just get curious, I would say.
Cool. I really like that. And to kind of feed two birds with one seed, to get back to, what we were talking about just before that question, and then also to give folks kind of a feel that might be interested in this career path, what it looks like day to day as a, data governance professional. What does your day to day look like? What are the kinds of things that you're working on?
So it varies day to day. So some days it can look like data vendor management and understanding where data is, who's using it, how they're using it, especially if it's licensed data. So that's extremely important. Other days it may be facilitating requirements from stewards as it relates to transparency and usage of the data domains that they have oversight and ownership and leadership of. So I would say it varies, but one of the things that I also try to do is just continuous education on trends and technology in general. So a prime example, AI, everyone's talking about it, right? It's been around for such a long time, but I think that it's just really come to this precipice of general use and open source type, capabilities. But how do companies expect to leverage AI, more specifically Gen AI, if their data is all over the place, if they have little insight to the quality of it, how to incorporate AI into your data strategy? So it's just keeping up to date and educating yourself on what's going on in the industry in general.
That's an interesting point that you raised there, and it's a perfect lead into my next question. So you mentioned, some companies are starting to dabble in or are going heavier on AI, more advanced use cases, and of course, the quality of the data is critical to be able to capitalize on use cases like that. What, in terms of data maturity, or analytics maturity within an organization, like what impact does that have on a data governance strategy, or maybe like how you work with those clients? Because to me, it seems like there's always like this baseline level need, but then it's like it might vary dramatically depending on where an organization is at. but I could be wrong. So I'm curious your perspective on that.
Yeah. So ultimately, I think that the changing environments and shifts within the industry really affect this. Just because when we think about banking, for instance, there were historically a lot of brick and mortar locations, and now a lot of people do online banking. They don't even go into a branch anymore, and kind of with asset and wealth management and cryptocurrency. So I think that the types of challenges that I'm seeing is the shift overall in the direction that they need to go in order to best support their clients. So, you may be mature in one area, but then something changes and you have to shift, and then it becomes something else. So compliance and security requirements, so like performance reporting, that really affects how that looks like. And I think just trying to keep up with technology and having the competitive advantage really affects, I think, how we view maturity in certain aspects. So I think that an organization that has a mature data governance, program, areas will obviously be governed in different ways. But when you add the aspect of cryptocurrency and different alternative data sources, it's just another thing to have to work through.
Yes, the cryptocurrency impact is one that it kind of gave me an icy shiver, like thinking back to like having to manage different currencies and some of the like front end reporting and analytics projects that I had. And that's a huge deal. Like I spent for companies that, manage different currencies or sell to countries that have different currencies, and, foreign exchange rate changes are a big impact on them. I mean, this is you're talking about a serious amount of time spent on this, and the data quality is a huge deal. I would say business critical. And so introducing new forms of currency, my gosh, like I had never thought of that until just now in terms of what a impact that would have on data governance. So, and that's just one example, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's just so vast, just because, like I mentioned, technology moves so quickly. And it's something else, like even with AI, how are you going to govern that? How do you incorporate that? So it's, definitely ever changing.
Yeah. And I think, I think a lot about that as well. Obviously I'm not in the data governance space, but in analytics, and I sit in IT, and I think a lot about that changing. There's a part of me that maybe the perfectionist in me always wants to, have an analytical program and have it be kind of like buttoned up and, complete. But that's really never the case, right? Technology is always changing. There's always going to be a new problem to solve, or a new, even if a shift or something that needs to be addressed. So I like that you call that out. And you briefly kind of talked about what an organization with a good data governance practice might think about, and some of the things that they need to have that. So I'm curious if you could elaborate a little bit more on what a best in class governance program looks like.
So I would recommend one, or I would view one that has mutual respect of individuals involved. You check your egos at the door. So that's number one. One that supports and adds value to the business. So why does the business even exist? What's its purpose? So making sure that that program essentially supports that. It enables and empowers data users. So ensuring that end users are educated and aware of the risks, and not necessarily viewing them as, stifling progress or innovation, but just really understanding the repercussions and things that could happen in the event that data is not governed and managed well. One that's measurable and effective. So if you can't measure it, you can't achieve it. So I think that in a nutshell kind of gives what a best-in-class governance program looks like. But then I think backing up to that, it's starting with the people, the buy-in and the sponsorship. You build rapport, a strong use case, and basically tying that in with the benefits, that benefits the business. And then you start with the processes, because the people will do the processes and then essentially the technology. So to do the processes, people will have to use technology. So I think overall, that is what I would recommend and what I've seen as best in class governance. So there are many ways to do it, and many methodologies and many approaches and many sizes, and it's not one size fits all. But I think that those core components makes one successful.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something that's really interesting and near and dear to my heart here, this topic of mutual respect fitting into a best in class, data governance program. And that may surprise some folks listening, I even myself, I'm a wholehearted believer in what she said, but I kind of raised my eyebrows like, oh yeah, that is the number one thing that I think someone should mention. What could you give folks an example? Because again, I think folks might be surprised to hear that as the number one thing. What does it kind of look like when there is that mutual respect amongst stakeholders and those developing the program? What does it look like with it, and what does it look like in absence of it?
Great question. So with it, there's a lot of collaboration. I think that also plays into the, how the company is working in the culture, essentially. So when there is mutual respect, people, I feel like, have a safe space within their environment to be candid and have candor and to be able to voice what's happening, as dirty as it may be or as uncomfortable as it may be. At least there's a space, and that people are mutually respectful of each other, that they can hear someone else's perspective, hear their ideas, hear their problems, and they come together, collaborate in the best interest of why the business exists. So I keep going back to the clients or the customers, but at the core of the business, I think it's super important to not lose sight of that, yes, we get tunnel vision and we have our day-to-day and we have our tasks and we come to work and we get paid and all those things. But why does the business exist in the first place? And it's to service clients and customers and, et cetera. So I think that keeping that at the core of it and just collaborating and combining efforts to best service that is essential. So checking your ego at the door. One person doesn't have to win over the other. So that's what I've seen that works best. And when I do see that division, there's little progress, very little progress, if any. And then the governance effort dies off. There are conflicting priorities. It's just so much easier and more enjoyable when people work together and they're collaborative and they're respectful.
I completely agree. And I think I hadn't really thought of it in terms of the impact and data governance initiatives specifically, just because until recently, it's not an area that I've worked much in. But I can definitely say that, like, in terms of, tech projects, analytics projects, like the same has been true. I mean, it's understandable, right? That like it can be a challenge to obtain that mutual respect or set the standard that it needs to be there, because there's a lot of emotions involved in seeing perhaps mistakes or bad processes that have been put in place and the impacts of things like that. But I like what you said, setting the ego aside is imperative, because when I have seen that done and when I have seen folks kind of just focus on the objective rather than, backing into their corner and being defensive about things, that's when there's an order of magnitude better results. And this is a real business impact. This is real dollars and cents tied to it, and when, from what I've seen, when there is that mutual respect and there is the setting the egos aside, the results are, like I said, order of magnitude higher dollars wise, and then the opposite is true when they're not. Can be a real loss. You're talking about time invested in a project, tools purchased, things like this that just don't come to fruition, don't reach their potential because you didn't set the groundwork with the mutual respect piece. So I absolutely love the fact that you called that out.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's, this idea of, I might have to steal that term, mutual respect, and describe it that way, because I always kind of talk about the human psychology component. And I think, even outside of data governance, I see that in the data analytics space, right? A lot of the times a data analytics team is, serving whether it's internal customers or external customers or their team or something. And, you have to work together to define, translate business requirements into technical requirements. And, there's just, sometimes it can be sometimes difficult to get all that information and um, to set aside, whether it's defensiveness or whatever. So I agree. I really like that we are really talking about that human component, and being able to collaborate together. It's probably something that we maybe don't talk about enough in the data space, but it's really, progress is slow if you don't have that. And so, there's a huge assumption built on the fact that we have this mutual respect in place. Um, but it's an assumption that we should definitely, it's important to talk about. So, Keshia, thanks so much for bringing that up as a topic, because it's really critical.
Yeah, and I know that something else that we've bonded over is just mindfulness and that psychology aspect. And at the end of the day, not to be morbid, but we have a short time here, right, in this life experience. And when we can be curious about other people's perspectives, and just where they're coming from, and just being open to receiving their perspective, I think it changes a lot. And I think people would be pleasantly surprised that we're all trying to solve the same problem, within the organization, and it, whatever process it may be, just varying perspectives.
Yeah, exactly. We come at it from different perspectives. And again, I think we all have the same goal in mind, which is to improve the business. And we just may take different ways of getting there. We may have different perspectives on where we're at and where we're going, but being able to kind of just share that and being open to listening and hearing, other people's perspectives. I agree. Really, really important. And being able to set aside your ego, I think, so critical. So again, so glad that you mentioned that. Um, Again, I love technology, but we're sitting here talking about things that really aren't technical solutions. Um, and best in class data and analytics governance program requires more than just technical solutions, right? You talk about people, you talk about process, and then technology, right? And so I'm curious. For example, do organizations need to rethink business processes when implementing their data governance programs? I guess, could you talk a little bit more about the process side of things?
Absolutely. So I think that leveraging technology without considering process improvement, you really risk the Band-Aid effect. So you focus on the symptoms versus the cause. And a quick example just from my past is I'm pulling state from contact object in Salesforce. I've got Alteryx, and I noticed there's WI for Wisconsin, there's Wisconsin spelled out, there's WISC, there's Wisconsin misspelled. So now I have to normalize all of that. And because it's a known normalization issue each month, I've already created a map. I'm leveraging my technology to do this. And why do all that work when you could go further up the chain, understand the process from the beginning, and implement a pick list field for US addresses? So that's kind of why leveraging technology can be very beneficial. And I love technology. I love learning all the tools and all the cool things they do, especially their marketing. It's amazing. But I also think that we can still be curious about, why am I having to do this every single month? Like, what are these mundane data quality things that maybe could be improved by a process, could be improved by some additional education, could be improved by just communication, that there is an issue. So I think that technology is definitely a partner. I think, though, that businesses would benefit from really taking a look at processes and allocating some time and investment into improving those processes.
Yeah. I guess I don't want to oversimplify what you just said, but there was something that you said that kind of struck a chord with me, and that's like, if you're doing something, if you're an analyst and you're working with your data, and I think that Wisconsin problem, or that data normalization problem, is a really good example. But if you're working with your data and you kind of are just, you ever stop to just be like, why am I doing this? It just generally, like, that should be a signal to say, let's go upstream, let's, implement a process, or let's talk to our data governance folks to see if we can put something in place so that I and everyone else at the organization never has to solve this problem again. So again, I don't want to oversimplify anything, but I think that would serve as should serve as a signal. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I love the why. So just asking, why am I doing this? Why is this happening? And you can even go further and ask like 5 more whys after that to really get to the root of it. But
Yeah.
yes, I definitely agree.
So yeah, for those folks in kind of lines of business wondering why they're having to, manipulate data in a certain way, reach out to your data governance team and see if that can be resolved. But so we've talked about people, we've talked a little bit about process. Let's talk a little bit more about technology. What are some of the tools and technologies in this data quality, data governance space?
So just to shout out a handful that I have had exposure with and experience with, Data.World, Elation, Calibra, CasterDoc, Atacama One, Precisely. They have a Govern 360 product. And like the larger companies like Informatica and Talent, they also have offerings. So I would say a lot of those tools, it comes down to data quality, data cataloging, lineage, even understanding where data is coming from, where it's going. So there's a vast and plethora of tools out there and capabilities that really support governance.
Very cool indeed. And I'm sure if folks have questions on specific tools or things like that, are you kind of open to, like, do people reach out to you and be like, hey, can you point me in the right direction on these things? Because it seems like a big space to navigate.
It really is. And I feel like each one of them do something a little bit different. And then obviously with AI, it's definitely slingshotting other vendors out into the space, and it's still so new to them. And it's just, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get quite a few questions on just not only experience with it, but how it works, and just what other consultants have heard and have had exposure to. So yeah, definitely get a handful of tool questions.
And we've talked about people, process, now tools. Who are the folks that are kind of most responsible in an organization just for data governance as a whole? It seems like a collaborative effort, but like, can you give folks a feel for kind of like who kind of the key stakeholders tend to be?
Yeah, I would say it's contingent on the organization. However, within the organization, what I have seen most that has been successful is a team or a group that's closer to the business, or one that sits in between the tech side and the business side. So I think that individuals who have both experience or at least exposure to the tech side and the business side really thrive in that space, just because they can easily communicate and be that bridge between the two groups. So I would say the majority I have seen closer to the business or in the business. I know that there have been a lot of groups within IT that have tried to do data governance, and it has unfortunately failed. And I think that it would be unfair to ask IT to be the lead or owner or steward of data that they don't even use. They may house the data, they may help you create the ETLs and establish the data feeds. But I think that those closer to the business, closer to the process, those closer to creating the data and actually using the data are more appropriate for governance.
And if you put yourself in the shoes of perhaps, a leader in the organization that's listening right now that maybe doesn't have a governance program at all, or maybe they have an evolving, governance program. It's not where they want it to be. Like, what's maybe one or two things that they should think about? I know this is a complex topic we're talking about here, but what's one or two things that maybe they should really think about that they should start maybe doing next week or, very soon to take steps towards getting something in place or evolving towards something that's better for their organization?
I would recommend getting real, for real, for real. So getting curious on how you got to where you are, creating a safe space for people to have candor and collaboration, and to understand it's not a one and done project, it's a program. So understanding the requirements of that, and that parties need to collaborate across the organization in order for it to be effective. So number one would be get real with where you're at today. And then I would say the second thing is getting really clear on where you want to be and why. So how do you envision the organization operating and serving your clients and customers in the best way possible, especially once you have these business problems figured out, right? And then I think ultimately, do you envision in this space like happy and engaged employees along with that? So it may be a combination of the two, but I think getting real and then getting clear with where you want to go.
Love it. That's awesome.
Yeah. I love, the vision and the strategy. I think you need to have that. And then we've talked about so many really good details around people, process, technology here. So thank you so much, Keshia, for elaborating on all of that, for sharing your knowledge with all of us. It's been really exciting and awesome to talk to you today. Curious if how people listening, our audience, can learn more about you, what you do, follow you, and both you and I would say your company.
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there, and I try to be really intentional about the things that I share. So I'm not going to blast something every single day just to do it for the algorithm. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Keshia Otradovec. And you can also find more information on Continuus Technologies website. So CONTINUS-technologies.com.
Yeah. And we can link all of that in the show notes as well, to both your LinkedIn and as well as Continuous's website. But yeah, I know I absolutely love seeing your posts in my LinkedIn feed. You always share really exciting, awesome nuggets of information that I think are really consumable, and just provide a different perspective, right? So really love having that stuff in my feed. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really, really awesome to have you and talk more with you more generally. For those listening to this podcast, I always make the ask, if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with the people that you think would find it valuable. Make sure to rate the podcast and subscribe to hear about future episodes. But thank you so much for your time today, Keshia. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a wonderful conversation, and I could talk data all day long and nerd out on all the technology and data things. So thank you for the consideration and just opportunity.
Thank you, Keshia. And for the listeners, we'll see you back in a couple weeks. Thanks again for a great conversation.
Bye.